Mr. Chairman, Singapore currently has one of the highest average class sizes among advanced countries in primary and secondary schools. In 2019, it amounted to 33 students per class. In contrast, the average among industrialized economies is a little more than 20. And even in East Asian economies such as Korea and Japan, student numbers in the primary school classroom only push a little past 25. To be clear, the trend in Singapore has improved over time. The pupil-teacher ratio at the primary level was around 26 at the turn of the millennium compared to 15 today. But this is hardly satisfactory in light of the fact that these numbers still pale in comparison to countries such as Denmark, 12, Austria, 11, and Luxembourg, 9. And while certain banded classrooms are indeed smaller, this does not cover students who are not currently struggling, who arrive there on the basis of supplementary educational support. Indeed, some may question why, in spite of these unflattering resource ratios, our students appear to be able to be producing some of the best test scores worldwide. Part of the reason is likely to be our heavy reliance on supplementary education, sometimes pejoratively called the shadow education system, supplied by families directly. Private tuition and other supplementary education expenses come up to $112 out of households' monthly educational expenditures, a little more than 2%. And this is more than what the average household spends on clothing and air travel, and about a quarter of what they spend to be able to put a roof over their heads. At the national level, we spent $1.4 billion on such additional private tuition. This is around 10% of the total that the government spends officially on public education. And to the extent that we believe public education should be largely self-contained, represents an additional and implicit tax on Singaporeans. To be clear, other East Asian societies, including China, Indonesia, Japan, and Korea, tend to engage more private tutors than other advanced countries. Around 70% of students in these aforementioned countries attend after-school lessons in mathematics, for instance, and unsurprisingly, I was one of them, compared to less than 20% in countries such as Austria, Canada, Finland, and New Zealand. Even so, the disparities between what we devote to public education expenditure is clearly indirectly, if imperfectly, made up for by private supplemental financing. Even setting our kiasu mindset aside, most parents do not have any burning desire to send their kids on to additional tuition if they're otherwise able to cope with the subjects. Consider how our tuition dollars are predominantly spent on subjects where students struggle, such as math or languages, and less on humanities, such as history or geography. Smaller class sizes can go a long way toward helping the average Singaporean household reduce their perceived need to engage additional private tuition. Perhaps more importantly, smaller class sizes can also help level the playing field. While the evidence in favor of small class sizes for overall student achievement is weak, albeit still positive, it is undeniable that individual students can benefit from smaller classrooms. A smaller number of students relieves the load on our teachers, thereby freeing them up to pay more attention to students that are falling behind. And since lower income households are less likely to be able to allocate additional finances toward tuition just so that their children may stay up to speed, this obviates the need for supplemental private tuition, which can prevent students from such households from falling even further behind. To this end, I am suggesting that the MOE perhaps consider capping class sizes at 23, which incidentally is the OECD average, and in particular for the most tutored subjects, such as mathematics as well as languages.
MOE has been closing schools and reducing its headcount of teachers due to declining birth rates and school enrollments. From 2011 to 2020, the number of teachers declined by 16% from 39,412 to 33,001. Allied educators who provide extra support to teachers in schools also declined by 32% from 1,772 to 1,205. However, the number of management executives increased by 260% from 851 to 3,066, and management support increased by 147% from 519 to 1,282. Can the Minister clarify why so many more management staff are needed to manage a declining number of teachers and students? What are the targeted number of teachers in the next few years? To introduce greater diversity and differentiated learning into our education system, we need smaller class sizes. I mentioned this last October, and I feel the need to bring it up again. With declining enrollment, it would have been the perfect opportunity to reduce class sizes had we not decreased the number of teachers and NIE intake. Not only would smaller class sizes provide better outcomes for students, it would be beneficial for the teachers as well. We ought to care for the teachers' emotional and mental loads as well, in addition to their workloads. Will the Minister consider resuming the recruitment of teachers to previous levels, especially at a time when job opportunities are greatly reduced due to the pandemic?
Mr. Patrick Tay, Associate Professor Jamus Lim, and Ms. Hazel Poa spoke about class sizes. Ms. Poa, in particular, highlighted that there had been a sharp reduction in the teaching force. I believe she is referring to figures from the budget book, and I should clarify that there had been some definitional changes in the budget book figures over the years, so these may not provide a meaningful year-to-year comparison. In fact, a better source of information to look at the size of our teaching force that's deployed in schools is the Education Statistics Digest, which we publish and is made available online. And if you look at the data, it will show that while there has been a slight decline in recent years, we have broadly maintained the size of our teaching force. At its peak, it was about 33,000, slightly over 33,000 a few years ago. Now it's about 32,000. So just a slight decline, not the sharp fall that Ms. Poa highlighted. Also, it is more relevant to compare our teaching numbers with our student enrollment numbers. So you got to look at the teaching size, teaching force in context, compared with the student enrollment. When we compute the pupil-teacher ratio, or the PTR, in our school system, we find a very clear trend. Over the last decade, the PTR has improved from about 19 and 16 in 2010 for primary and secondary school levels to about 15 and 12 currently. And this is comparable to the OECD averages. So the question is really about how we choose to allocate our teachers across our education system. Today, we are deliberate in deploying them where they can maximize their impact as part of our needs-based resourcing approach. So we deploy more teachers for students at the earliest grade levels or for those with greater needs. For example, our learning support programs run in class sizes of 8 to 10. Foundation subjects in upper primary are taught in smaller classes between 10 to 20 students in most instances. Classes are also generally smaller for secondary students in the normal technical course. Compared to other OECD countries, we also devote a larger share of our teachers' time to important activities that are crucial for students' holistic development, like CCAs, like professional development, and lesson preparation. So when members cite our larger class sizes compared to OECD norms, I hope they understand that it's not that we have fewer teachers compared to other countries. Associate Professor Lim also suggested that it is our heavy reliance on private tuition that plays a part in our students doing well in international benchmarks. But really, that's not being very fair to our teachers who work so hard and give so much of themselves for every child in school. In fact, the OECD and our other research point to teacher quality as being the critical element in influencing student learning and performance. So we have capable, motivated, and a first-rate team of teachers, and we will continue to invest in them and focus their time on what matters. This means continuing to reduce the amount of time teachers spend on lesson marking and administrative work, including through the use of technological tools and additional manpower support. And wherever possible, we will certainly look at having smaller class sizes in more areas. especially in subjects where students can benefit from more interaction and more space for discussion. The bottom line is this: MOE will continue to secure as much resources as we can for the ministry, and we will deploy our teachers in a way that achieves the best outcomes for every child. Whatever resources we have, MOE will have to prioritize them to achieve our desired outcomes. Ms. Hazel Poa asked for more support for those who are outside the mainstream system, including homeschoolers and those in private schools. We will continue to look into these suggestions, but I hope everyone understands that resources are always going to be constrained, and we will need to prioritize them for students in our national system.
Just start by respectfully disagreeing with the characterization that I'm devaluing the work of our teachers by pointing out the gap filled by private tuition. So let me state for the record, I have tremendous respect for the quality of our teachers and the efforts that they put in, but I think that said, I think we both can agree, even the best and most hardworking teachers will generally be unable to assist their children as much as they would wish if they're hamstrung by heavy loads. So when I call for smaller class sizes, I'm implicitly calling for MOE to provide our teachers with the environment such that their quality may be fully experienced by the teachers because they're not stretched too thinly. And if what we're concerned about is an ability to maximize the impact of this existing high-quality teachers, if we're not going to have an outright reduction in class sizes, perhaps we'll consider supplying teaching aids or assistants to the classrooms teaching the tuition-intensive subjects that I mentioned, namely math and the languages.
MOE will continue to ensure that we have a high-quality teaching force and make sure that we have healthy pupil-teacher ratios. Already our ratios today are comparable with OECD standards, so it's not for a lack of teachers. Second, we will do everything we can to support our teachers. Mr. Associate Professor Lim highlighted that because of the heavy loads of the teachers, they may be hamstrung and may not be able to be as effective as they would like. Also, we will continue to review with all our educators what's the best way to allocate their times across the different areas of work that they do, both in classrooms and outside of classrooms. Bearing in mind that when you make these OECD comparisons, many other countries do not have the same kind of CCA provisions that we have in Singapore. Neither do they have teachers spending time in these areas. I've asked our educators before, would you like to cut back your time on CCAs? And many of them say no, they think they value their time in CCAs because they recognize that this time outside of the classroom is important for holistic development of students. So we will continue this conversation and engagement with our teachers to give them our full support from the MOE HQ and see whatever they need to get their job done. And as I said, to provide holistic learning, teaching and learning for every child.